Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I guess you could say, the first podcast episode for my new thing called Gamers Oasis. My name's Amy, and I wanted to, well, start things off a bit interesting, to say the least. This podcast is basically going to be anything geeky, really, from board games to video games, comics to movies, TV shows, just whatever sort of strikes the fancy in that sort of space. Anyway, I will probably at the end of each episode ask what sort of things do you guys want me to talk about. I could go in depth on video game lore, comic books, whatever really. But since this is the first episode, and obviously you guys can't tell me what you want for my first episode, sorry. Oh, frog in my throat there for a second. I figured I'd start things off nice and simple. In this case, I'm going to be talking about one of my Dungeons and Dragons characters now. I play this game a lot. I have been playing this game since I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I have several different characters over the years that have been memorable, to say the least. There was one that we actually got up to the epic levels, and she was a very interesting character. Now, most people play 5th edition nowadays. Everyone pretends 4th edition doesn't exist for a very good reason. My group, though, we actually stick with 3.5. Partially because we like it better. The rules make a little bit more sense. It's not too simple because sometimes when they add new rules, they kind of water down how difficult a game can be, at least in our opinion. And so we play 3.5 edition, which also is what Pathfinder was initially based off of. So, without further ado, I'm going to tell you a few things about this character I had back in the day. She's actually still technically alive, but we stopped playing these characters. And she was a bard. It was the first time I'd ever played a bard or really anything magical. I usually was the person who was playing the rogue and sneak attack behind people's backs sort of thing. Um, but Myra was a bit of an interesting character. I actually created a backstory. I'd have to find where I put it, but she she did a few memorable things. She was the character aside from one other that lasted the longest out of everyone in the campaign. We had near TPKs, but she tended to survive for against all odds, considering she had less hit points than the wizard did. Anyway, so a few of the memorable incidents. So Myra wasn't just a bard, she was what's called a seeker of the song. Now that's a prestige class, sort of a buffed up class that you could take in the game. And the seeker of the song focused more on the music aspect of the bard rather than the magical side where they used spells. I almost chose, when I was making her, I almost chose to go for the one that went spellcasting because let me tell you, the idea of a bard with 9th level spells, that was always an interesting idea. And that prestige class was titled the Sublime Chord, but I ended up going with the Seeker of the Song, and my dad was the DM for the party. And so I told him because it had a special requirement for the prestige class that we had to come across a Seeker of the Song. And so he put it in the party for me to be able to do that. And what this class did was it did a few interesting things once I eventually reached it. Let me spend bardic music to basically shoot fire from my fingertips or make it so that we're resistant to fire. I could do sonic damage. I could break enchantment eventually. That was fun and very useful, mind you. But that's just how things ended up eventually being. But back before I was high enough level, we were in, I think it was called the Hidden Valley, ironically, or the Secret Valley or something like that. And there was a sort of rundown ruins and temple that we went to. And as mentioned, this is before I ended up becoming the seeker of the song sort of thing, and was just a normal bard. We went along into this temple area, and we there was a lower level that we couldn't get to, but it was incredibly dark down there. And what happened was that the party were all sitting there waiting to see if we could figure out what it was. And I had this idea. I'm like, hey, what if I cast light on this rock and we toss it down there so that we can see what's down there before we jump down? And everyone agreed. Great idea. And so I did that. I picked up a rock, cast the spell light on it so that it illuminated, and dropped it down the hole. It hit something before it hit the ground, and what I saw freaked me out because this was before I knew what this monster even was, which is kind of sad, but I was still not as well versed in monsters as other members of our Dungeons and Dragons group were. And so as soon as I saw like 5 little tentacles with eyes coming towards us. Everyone around the table, you can hear a pin drop. Because up comes floating a beholder. I hit a beholder in the head. For anyone who does not know what a beholder is a giant eyeball monster. And if you are within sight of its big eyeball, you can't use magic. Magic doesn't work. It's its anti-magic field. And each of the little tentacle eyeballs up on the top of its head can each do a very, very different spell sort of effect. The most famous being Disintegrate. And so we ran for the hills. We tried to fight it at first, but we ended up running for our lives because our lives depended on it. And that made for a very interesting scenario. Eventually, we did go back. And we're like, okay, so we can't see where the beholder is. Maybe it moved. And so I'm like, okay, I'll cast light on a rock again and we'll drop it down the hole. How many people can say that they dropped a rock on a beholder's head twice? Because that's exactly what happened. I hit a beholder in the head with a rock twice without even actually trying. And so ensues a fight. And we ended up running away because we weren't fully prepared to just go after the beholder. And we're like, we have to actually plan this out accordingly because beholders scare everyone. Because they can kill you within 2 seconds flat. And so, fast forward to attempt number 3. We had a better idea to potentially, I don't remember which spell we used. It was either Dimension Door or Teleport. It might have been Teleport because we couldn't really see where we were going. And we transported half the party down there after I dropped a rock on the beholder for a 3rd time. And so half the party went down immediately. And so the beholder didn't start coming up, it started paying attention to them, and the other half of the party, we featherfalled straight down into the hole and onto the right level. And so we finally, after me hitting the beholder in the head with a rock 3 times, mind you, we eventually were able to destroy and kill the thing. That party got into so much mayhem and chaos. My bard also, though, as mentioned, kind of saved the day, surprisingly large amount. For instance, there's a moment where I, as the bard, because the way bards work is they obviously are like the great fifth character in a party. Because usually in a party, you want a sneaky person, a divine caster, an arcane caster, and a fighter. And bards typically are the best fifth slot character, where they will act as a support sort of thing for everyone else, and they can potentially fill in the gaps for like a sneaky person because they can sneak off and do that. Though they can't disable traps, they can act as a fightery type if you build them that way. They can technically heal people, and they can cast arcane spells. And that was easily one of the more memorable things that happened. There was a few instances where this bard here went on strike, complete with I used minor image to just create a little sign that said bard on strike and propped it up next to me because people were taking advantage of me. For instance, I had a magic recorder that I had gotten because I befriended. I think it was Faye, technically, I befriended. It wasn't all too clear what it was. But I I got this magic recorder that if you use one bardic music effect on it, it would cause fast healing of 3 for 10 rounds, which is great, especially in the earlier levels because it keeps you up longer, right? Well, our cleric at the time wasn't really doing much. Like, she wasn't fully doing her job. And so people started yelling at me to heal everyone. And I wasn't really the main healer, and our cleric was there. So, off we went to the bard being on strike and refusing to do anything. Bard was not going to sit there and boost everyone's attacks. The bard was not going to sit there and heal everyone. No, I decided to just go stab things because I was done with people taking advantage of me. And that kind of got the point across real quick because let me tell you, without the bonuses of the bard at those levels, that ended remarkably well for the party. There's a few other things that we ended up doing. I ended up with a magic item that technically comes from 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, but my dad basically had made it work for 3.5 edition, called the Rod of Wonder. And while I, as the bard, didn't do much in the spellcasting range, we had decided to give it to me so that I could potentially do some damage. Now, here's the thing with the Rod of Wonder. You can't predict what it's going to do. It's a Rod of Wonder. It randomly does things. You just say the magic word and you don't know what you're going to get. Like giving a spider wings or something. We also caused a rhino to fall out of the sky because we accidentally summoned monster with it. Now, in a pinch, if you got nothing else to lose, use that thing. And while I was on strike, we were taking our rest, and we suddenly were surrounded by zombies. And we're talking a lot of zombies. And most of the fightery characters didn't have their armor because they couldn't. Obviously, they didn't have what's called a restful crystal, which allows them to sleep while in their armor, in their heavier armor. So they weren't really doing much, and we were in, I can't remember what the spell is called, but it summons up like a little hut sort of thing. So we were in a little room. And so the wizard cast a spell on this giant axe and started chucking it around. And so the wizard was doing the most melee damage against these zombies. And then there was me, who thought, we might all die to zombies. This doesn't sound good. Let me pull out the rod and see if it can save our skins. Yeah, I got Meteor Swarm. So, Cue the bard doing more arcane damage than the wizard, and the wizard doing more melee damage than the fighters. Yeah, sometimes the power balance in this party was like insanely weird. We also had a werebore in our party, um, which made things more intriguing, to say the least. Um, God, there were so many different things that Myra got up to. Um, to show proof of what the rod could potentially do to a person. Well, at one point, it made it so that the bard went from being a woman to a man. It basically cursed me and gave my character a bit of a sex change. And it was very weird, considering the fact that I am. So, a lot of people need to remember that for bards and characters like them, that the stats, typically the stat distribution, charisma is your best friend. It is what all your saves are based off of. It's literally everything. And bards are meant to be kind of the talker of the party. And, well, that made things interesting as, um, instead of being this really hot woman, I was suddenly this really hot guy. And that ended up resulting in a very, very, very not great incident. Because we ended up in a world that magic worked, in like a realm where magic worked really, really weird, called the Hollow World. And it's basically like a world within the main world that we were campaigning in. And so magic didn't work quite right in this world. And we ended up in essentially kind of a country that was similar in a way to ancient Egypt. So there were the pharaoh, queen, all of that. And we were just like, hey, we're just passing through. Sorry for intruding upon your lands. And that resulted in the pharaoh's wife deciding to hit on my character. Before the pharaoh himself had actually walked into the room. So my sister, her character Luna, basically tried to get me away so that the pharaoh's wife wasn't near me anymore. Never even got that character's name. And accidentally knocked me over to be on top of her right when the pharaoh walked into the room. And it made things a bit interesting, to say the least. And awkward. At first, he didn't seem too mad or anything, and we're like, we're gonna leave in the morning. We'll get out of your hair. And he didn't seem mad at the time. And then we went to sleep. And I've never had a character have assassination attempts. So that was something that occurred because of this accidental incident with regards to the pharaoh's wife. And I'm just like, I didn't even mean to do anything. And of course, the entire party's sitting there cracking up laughing because they find this whole thing hilarious. And we dealt with the assassins, and then we're like, we should probably just, peace out, leave, not have to worry about anything else. And, well, that, that ended, another little sort of thing there. That's what I love so much about role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons is that you can create your own little world. Like, you can have these full stories. Like, I have so many stories for Dungeons and Dragons characters that could probably fill up a book or something. I feel like a lot of avid Dungeons and Dragons players probably have similar sort of stories. Um, and it's always a lot of fun to see what sort of things one can accomplish in that sort of world. And it's also interesting to see how quickly everyone else kind of bands together on an idea, or like the certain quirks that come to mind. Like for instance, if my mom and my oldest sister are playing, you want to keep them away from buttons and levers because they will push the buttons and pull the levers without thinking. Um, Another friend of ours, he'll always go for the giant gems, even if pulling it out turns out to be the power source to the flying ship we're in and causing us to all fall from the sky. It's just always fun to see the little quirks and interesting things that people sort of do. And so for me, I always tend to be the person in the party who I love puzzles. Like one of the earliest memories I have of Dungeons and Dragons was we were given the spell book and we had to decipher what it said on the front cover in order to be able to open it. And someone else in the party was like, "Well, this part looks like it's an apostrophe S." And so I was sitting there looking at it because if that's apostrophe S, we can decipher some of the words. And that's when I flipped open the spells because I'm like, well, it's a spell book. Maybe it'll be able to, maybe it has a spell name on it or something. And I realized that one of the phrases on the book said Melf's acid arrow. And that kind of triggered a tsunami of us being able to decipher the book. And I actually also deciphered an entire map because I got bored. And I was given I was given extra XP for that one too. I was given like 1,000 extra XP because I filled out this entire map and just completely deciphered the entire thing. And so then I was able to use it when we were in certain areas of this place. And I also tend to be the person that'll hold on to random things until they become relevant again. Like for instance, with Myra, we came across this like bronze thing that had some weird, almost coordinate sort of things on it when she was like level 1 or 2, and when we eventually got out of the Hollow World, like I was like level 15 or 16 by that point, and we came across this this device that had coordinates on it similar to that, and I still had what this bronze thing had said on it written down. And as soon as I said that, everyone around the table just looked at me. They're like, "Wait a minute, you kept that after all this time? You had that written down since level 2?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you never know. It might be useful." Helpful even. And that's always the nice thing about the game. Like you you can see the quirks behind people. You can see the sort of characters that certain people lean towards. For instance, my little brother, he basically was like dwarven fighter. He's still learning the game, and I recommended that if he wants to try out a spellcaster, he should probably try out a bard because bards can be fightery types if you build them that way. But you also don't have to prepare spells, and they have enough slightly different about them that you can just go off, have your own fun time, and not overly think about the spellcasting aspect. Either that or sorcerer. And definitely makes things a bit interesting. Though also pairing your character with the right feats to make them more interesting also helps. Like Myra, for instance, there's a lot, at least for 3.5 edition. I don't know about 5th edition. There's a lot of feats that add to bardic music. the bardic music ability. For instance, God, I'm trying to. Oh, now I remember what it's titled. It's a feat titled Soothe the Beast, and it basically lets you use bardic music, like Wild Empathy, but you're using your performance check instead of like survival or something like that, whatever Wild Empathy uses. And so my character ended up being adopted by a monster called a Grey Render. I named him Harvey. I am a Weird Al fan, and I watched the Weird Al show, and the joke was that he's Harvey the Wonder Hamster. And complete with he was powering a gnomish flying ship in a hamster wheel. So definitely makes things more fun that way. Um and then there was a moment where there was one moment I had never seen so many people pull out a player's handbook so quickly because there was a question that either the answer was going to save our hides or kill us all, and it had to do with Wild Empathy because we so by this point I was back to being a woman because all magic had shut off in the world for a little bit, so I got turned back into my normal self. And we in order to get out of the Hollow World, we had to go through either the North or South Pole. And the North or South Pole had well had a anti-magic field sort of thing. So magic doesn't work there. And we came across a Tarrasque. And when I say Tarrasque, I mean like a full-size Tarrasque. And we were like level 15, 16 around there when we were attempting this, but all our magic didn't work. And for anyone who knows how a Tarrasque works, that would scare you. That would scare you a lot because they are incredibly dangerous even if you're able to use magic properly. And so everyone of legal drinking age around the table, we passed out wine coolers because everyone's like, "Can I have a drink of something? Anything?" Because we're like, we're all going to die. And so everyone started flipping through things and we're like, "Okay, so what do we have that we could potentially use because we can't outrun this thing not very easily." And that's when I looked at how Soothe the Beast is worded. And so I raised my hand around the table as everyone's, drinking their wine coolers or whatever and trying to think. And I asked out loud, does Wild Empathy work in an anti-magic field? And everyone stopped because the way it's worded is that either is for anti-magic zones is that spell-like abilities don't work, but supernatural ones do. Um, and wild or something like that. And Wild Empathy, the feat specifically mentioned. Look at how it's worded for the druid. So I mean, everyone around the table pulled out their book, player's handbook, and started flipping to the druid section to see how Wild Empathy is worded. And the cheers around the table when it was discovered and ruled that it would work in the anti-magic field, man, that was insane. And it's moments like that too where you think outside the box because you can do some planning, you can think about how things are and whatnot. Anyway, I know I've probably seemed like I've been rambling a bit, but I always love talking about Dungeons and Dragons, the sort of characters we have, all that sort of thing. And that's just one of the many, many characters I have. I'll see if I can find her backstory because I could probably see about if people are interested reading off the backstory I had made for her. Because I remember my dad had a book that was like, hey, you can roll and maybe on tables to at least get a starting point and work your backstory around that whole thing. And yeah, so Myra's technically still alive, even though I don't play as her anymore. Though where she is and what's going on with that is a story for another day. I'm probably going to keep this little episode shorter. God, I'm doing this for half an hour about. Dang. Didn't think I could go that long. Anyway, so I hope you guys at least enjoyed a little story time here in the Gamers Oasis. If you want to hear any sort of stories or about more Dungeons and Dragons, like for instance, I could probably tell you a few other things about Myra or read you her backstory, or I could tell you about my current Dungeons and Dragons character. Or if you want to talk about video games or comic books, let me know what sort of ideas you have. Like, for instance, I could do character in depth stuff for superheroes or go into like video game timelines and lore, depending. And hopefully, you all enjoy yourself, and I will see you next time. I'm probably going to be uploading these once a week, probably on Fridays. Just makes my life easier. And hopefully, we will see you again next time. Bye.